The shocking announcement of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 is nearly 4 months old, and it seems there's a whole lot that we simply are not being told about this new sim. Now, sure, over the past few months, Microsoft have filled in a few details here and there. However, there's still a lot of uncertainty, a lot of doubt, and a lot of confusion. What's more, it appears that some highly anticipated features for the 2020 edition are now being moved into 2024 instead. So, what exactly is going on, and more importantly, what are the points that we are yet to be told? Recently then, Jörg Newman, head of Microsoft Flight Simulator, stated that we probably won't be hearing or seeing more about the 2024 version until the spring.
When will we start to see new information about 2024?
Yeah, probably in the spring, honestly.
Now, personally, whilst I'd much rather hear things much sooner than that, well, at the very least, this gives us some insight as to when we could potentially expect the new sim to arrive. Consider that Flight Sim 2020 released in August of 2020, meanwhile the Xbox version arrived in July 2021. So always around about the second half of the year. So whilst that's no hard and fast rule for these things, I would personally hope to see that Flight Sim 24 is released around about this time next year. None of that, however, gives us any information on a lot of unanswered questions, and that there are many, so let's take a look at some of these. Now, a while ago, Microsoft admitted that they are moving on to 2024 because there are a lot of things that they now just simply can't do with 2020. Essentially, they admitted they've hit the limit of what they can do with the current iteration of Flight Simulator. But what does this mean specifically? What are they not telling us about the limitations of 2020?
Just be aware, and you heard from Seb why we're doing it. We are butting up to what we technically can do with the sim that we have. That's why it's there. Okay? All right.
Well, we can take a guess at some of these, although we don't know officially for sure. But what does seem to be certain is that Microsoft and Asobo are having problems with the codebase in the current edition of the game. Speculation, of course, but it does look very likely. Now, what we can guess about the limitations of 2020 is simply based on the fact that Microsoft have discussed certain points and tried to fix certain things for a very long time now and made relatively little progress on these particular things. A few of these are multiplayer cockpits, the crashes to desktop problems which are pretty much consistent for a lot of people, the live weather improvements that never really seem to make it fully into the sim, as well as ongoing trouble with the live traffic. Not to mention the trouble with ATC as well. Now, if the sim had a small team working on the game or wasn't receiving active development, we could simply speculate that the development time wasn't worth the effort, that Microsoft simply don't have the resources to put into this. However, we do know that a big team, perhaps one of the biggest ever, is working on the flight sim, so that really puts resources out of the question and really only leaves the hard and fast problem that is issues with the limitations, the problems with the codebase itself. So that's the first point, kind of a few bits we know, but a lot we certainly don't. And moving on, what will differentiate Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 from 2020? The trailer and the FAQ give us some insight into what's going on here. However, there's a few other things that we don't know too much about just yet. We know we're going to get careers, seasons, new graphics, but are these really enough to fully differentiate the final product? The question I'm trying to ask here, the point I'm really trying to raise is, well, is 2024 just going to be an iteration, a slight improvement on 2020? Until we hear and see more information on the sim, it's not really going to be possible to tell. However, that said, we can look at the past for a little bit of guidance. Consider for a moment that over the past 40 years, there's been roughly 14 full releases of Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, some of these have been massive improvements over the previous one, others have simply been slight improvements, minor iterations. It's without question that Flight Sim 2020 was 100% a massive leap forward over everything that had come before. This was a significant update. Now, I think it's unreasonable to expect that 2024 is going to be the same sort of leap forward, and really, to be honest, I don't think anyone out there actually expects that to be the case. Bottom line, just how different is 2024 going to be to 2020? Now that leads us on to another question we don't know too much about just yet. As I said earlier, Microsoft have admitted that they've hit limitations with the 2020 codebase. We also know they're going to make obviously some substantial improvements, but the big question is just how much of the codebase is going to be rewritten. Now, one thing we do know from recent Q&As is that a lot of the codebase, a lot of the client that you download and install onto your home computer is going to be moved online. This means, theoretically at least, the big updates like the one we've just got for Sim Update 13 won't be a thing in the future. Instead, the remote parts of the client will be updated and the part you download should be relatively small, or at least by comparison. Now, this is going to be good news for anyone who has a slow internet connection or who has had trouble installing some of these recent updates. The fact that these big updates might be consigned to a thing of the past should be a good news indeed. With that said, the idea of moving some of the client online, much in the same way we have photogrammetry online right now, does bring its own set of problems and certainly brings a whole bunch of very big questions that again Microsoft are not telling us anything about just yet. What, for example, does this mean for offline play? And will it even be possible to play Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 offline? There's three different ways I see this playing out. The first is the least likely one, and that is Microsoft change their mind and ultimately 2024 comes out with the same client requirements as 2020. Basically, you download everything but the photogrammetry. The second option is the one I see the most likely. Basically, if chunks of the client are going to be online, this will mean that online requirements will be absolutely mandatory and offline play may not be a thing. But there is a third option, and that is if you choose to play a Flight Sim of 2024 offline and it has that option, just maybe a certain functionality will not be available and you'll have a much limited version of the sim. Right now, all of this remains entirely unknown, but they are significant questions and ones which I would prefer Microsoft to answer sooner rather than later. Now, moving on to a slightly different subject, this is to do with both Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 as well as 2024. Now, Microsoft have said that support for 2020 will be continuing, that they will continue to issue updates and fixes and improvements for this version of the sim. However, this raises a lot of other questions that Microsoft just aren't talking about at the moment, a lot of things that they're simply not telling us. And I'll go through a few of these step by step. One of them is, well, if they're going to continue supporting the current edition of Flight Sim, just how long are they going to continue that support for? To me, it seems entirely unlikely that such support will continue on indefinitely, and that at some point in the future they will wind down support for Flight Sim 2020. Well, and if that happens, what does that mean for access to photogrammetry for that version of the sim? Now, very much related to this is the subject of world updates. Now, we know that world updates always bring improved photogrammetry, improved terrain, and a whole bunch of other features to the sim, and they're some of the best updates that Microsoft have released for the sim. Now, it seems likely that these type of updates will continue with 2024. But here's the thing, the photogrammetry could well end up being different between 2020 and 2024. And that means, if that's the case, what happens with future world updates? Would the world updates be released for both 2020 and 2024 simultaneously? The other option is that just maybe there will be two different world updates, one version for 2020 and an entirely different world update for 2024. To me, that seems unlikely, simply based on the fact that it would require a vast amount of work. That then leads us quite naturally to another thought. What if world updates are only going to be available for 2024 and will no longer be coming out for 2020? Just because Microsoft say they're going to continue support for 2020, it doesn't mean that they'd carry on getting all the world updates and the other big content patches. As with many of the other things I've discussed in today's video, well, it's all very difficult to figure out. We don't know what's going to happen simply because Microsoft are not talking about it in any way whatsoever. Now, I know a few of you out there are going to be saying, well, just sit back, chill out, wait and see. And yeah, on the one hand, I'll entirely agree with that. Yet another part of me just feels that it would be nice to know what the future will hold for the future of this franchise. A lot of people out there are putting a ton of money into add-ons as well as hardware for Flight Sim 2020. And it would be nice to have a few assurances about the future of this version of the sim, and if not, have a little bit of guidance as to what we can expect to see with the 2024. Unfortunately, with Microsoft saying we probably won't hear much until spring, that's going to be another 6 months until we probably maybe get any solid answers, hopefully at least. So yeah, until then, do let me know what you think about all of this in the comments section below. Personally, I'm very much looking forward to the idea of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, but in large part, I really don't know what to expect beyond the initial few bits of information that Microsoft have already shared. So yeah, let me know in the comment section below what you think about all of this. As always, thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys and girls next time.